so happy that you're joining us, for sticking around. We have some great recipes to teach you, and join, as always, Stephanie Gladman, our dietitian.
Hello, hi everybody, welcome. Thanks so much for joining. So for today's cooking demonstration, we've got a nice 3 recipes in store for you. And these ones are particularly geared towards those experiencing partial bowel obstruction. So as a registered dietitian at UHN, specifically in the supportive care world, I see a lot of patients post-treatment. And what this means is that sometimes they've been diagnosed with a bowel obstruction, whether that's partial. Their diet actually is really important in their role in managing this. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about what that is and some of the nutrition recommendations. And then as we move through today's cooking demonstration, we'll really focus on what to have more and what to have less of. Okay, so a partial bowel obstruction is basically when the small or large bowel is partly or fully blocked, and it's the narrowing or blocking, and it can be due to cancer, it can be because of scarring from surgery, radiation treatment, or even pressure from fluid in the abdomen. And so when this happens, this could be very dangerous. And the reason is that basically it makes it really hard for your bowel movement, your poo, to pass through the bowel, right? And so this can make it challenging to eat, and you might need to avoid certain foods, okay? And so basically it's fiber, okay? Because fiber is basically what increases the size of your poo. So it's generally recommended to have a low fiber diet so that your stool can pass more easily, all right? And now, a lot of times what I hear from my patients is, my whole life I've been told to have a high fiber diet. So lots of vegetables and fruit, whole grains, nuts and seeds. And now they're struggling because this is kind of contradictory to what they were originally thought or told. And that is the case, and it can be very frustrating. Now, what it doesn't mean is it doesn't mean that you cannot have vegetables or fruit or eat all the yummy things. It's just a matter of tailoring it down, limiting it. And so UHN has an excellent document called Low Fiber Diet for Partial Bowel Obstruction. And so you could always just Google that title in the search. Again, Low Fiber Diet, Partial Bowel Obstruction, UHN, and a PDF document will come up. And it's a great tool because it does focus on, foods to choose more of and ones to avoid. In general, you do want to limit your fiber intake to 10 to 15 grams per day. And you can have vegetables and fruit, okay? However, you really want to make sure that you remove all skins, all membranes, all seeds, and to cook it quite well, right? So this basically decreases the amount of fiber that you're intaking. You can still get your array of color. You can still get all your nutrients and vitamins. It's just in a different way and a different way of looking at it. So without further ado, let's get started. Jeremy's going to walk us through 3 separate recipes that all focus on this low fiber, low residue diet.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. So to get started, the first recipe is a delicious creamy tomato soup. It's a nice simple recipe, but it has that definite comfort vibe to it. So it's one of our favorites. And we're going to be addressing some of those sort of choose and don't choose, and how we can approach some of those ingredients as well. So first thing that we're going to do, and you can see on my cutting board here, we're going to start off with some flavor, right? We want to bring some aromatics to this soup. One of our favorites to use in the kitchen, something we use quite often, is garlic, right? Garlic stuff would be considered on the no choose, right?
Yeah, so that's one of the ones that you want to avoid for sure, just because it contains like higher amounts of fiber. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you want to avoid it. And JR, I know like a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, I love the taste of garlic and onions, and those ones we want to kind of avoid as much as possible. But JR has this really great trick to keep the flavor, but without actually eating the onion or the garlic.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And so we're using garlic. You can definitely use onion as well. And we want to just get that flavor out of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to infuse our oil. So we're going to have a little bit of olive oil in our pan as we're going to cook the soup in. And we want to infuse it with that garlic flavor. So I'm just simply going to cut it in half. And with the cloves, I might just gently crush it a little bit with the side of my knife, just to break it open. And we can get some of that already, some of that garlic aroma coming out. But leaving it partially intact, and we're going to add it to our pan here, medium heat. I'll bring you over to this side now. What I want to do is just infuse the olive oil. Okay, so we're going to get all that garlic flavor in there. Maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I don't want to burn it, so just like a gentle kind of heat. And then after, at the end of the soup, because it's still relatively intact, we can remove the garlic. That way the garlic flavor stays, but you don't have to worry about actually eating the garlic itself. So that is a great way, and you can do that with onion as well, to get some of the onion flavor, shallots, that sort of thing. Great aromatics to use, ginger, like so many different options, but leaving it in its mostly whole state to infuse the oil or the soup itself is a great technique to still include that flavor. Okay, so while the onion is rolling, we're going to move on to, I guess, the main star of this tomato soup. And we're going to be using our whole tomatoes. I am using canned tomatoes, which you can use whole tomatoes, fresh tomatoes as well. But the thing to keep in mind, and I know Stephanie is going to go into this as well, is the skins and the seeds, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so great kind of segue here. So, again, when we talk about healthy eating or eating well post-cancer, it really, what I love to emphasize, and I talk about this with my patients all the time, is eating well looks different for everybody. Okay, so yeah, maybe your friends and family, eating well for them means, having a variety of fiber in their diet. If you are experiencing, or a loved one has, a bowel obstruction, as I mentioned, having a high fiber diet, no bueno. So we need to make sure we limit that. We can still get the essential nutrients and vitamins that we need. And, talking about eating the color of the rainbow, you certainly can do that. Get your reds, your yellows, your greens, your oranges, but just thinking about the portion sizes and how much you're having. So tomatoes is a perfect example of a great red vegetable, although it's just fruit, but same. But you want to make sure that you remove the skin, so the membrane, and those seeds. So having canned tomatoes, again, that's already doing the work for you. But that red color is giving us the vitamin C. It gives us the lycopene. Okay, and actually, when your tomatoes are cooked and mixed with olive oil or any type of fat, that lycopene is actually more efficient, and that's an antioxidant, right? And that helps protect your cells against kind of oxidation and cancer. Okay, so really great way, and we're having the soup. And so, generally speaking, the recommendation for those with a partial bowel obstruction is to have no more than 4 servings of vegetables or fruit per day. And a serving is about a half a cup. So basically, a half a cup is about a half size of your fist. So basically, if you were to have 1 cup of whatever vegetable you're having, let's say it's tomatoes, then that's 2 servings. And so you can have 2 servings of vegetables in your day and 2 servings of fruit. Or you could have 3 servings of vegetables and 1 serving of fruit, right? So you get the idea. Total of 4, and between vegetables and fruit. Okay. And you know, winter time is here. We love that comfort food. So go ahead, make a really nice hearty soup. And those with my, you know, the bowel obstruction, well, make sure that you're decreasing that amount of fiber or limiting the amount you're having by removing the skins and the seeds.
Yes, so we have our garlic. You can see how I have a little bit of color going on there, which is great. And now I can add my tomatoes. And I'm using canned. These are like a San Marzano type tomato, plum tomato. I know there was a question in the chat on recommending using a higher quality tomato, can of tomato or tomato paste. And yeah, saying that sometimes it doesn't specifically say San Marzano. So if it is San Marzano, if it's truly San Marzano, it should be labeled San Marzano. If it doesn't, it's likely not. But any canned variety will work, to be honest. The one thing I would say is if you're going to be using it in a soup like this, and just be careful, let it cool down a little bit, but if you're going to be using it in a soup like this, I use whole tomatoes because I'm going to be cooking it down, I'm going to be blending it. Whole tomatoes, I find they break down a little bit nicer, whereas diced tomatoes, like the canned diced tomatoes, they're usually treated with a preservative or an additive that prevents them from sort of breaking down. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just it'll hold its shape and they won't kind of cook down and soften the way that whole tomatoes will. So that's the first thing. If you're going to be using a canned tomato, use a whole version. They're peeled. Mostly all the seeds are removed as well, which is great. And if you do see any extra, you know, you can try to scoop those out, but they do a pretty good job of removing all the skins and seeds, which is what we want in this case. And then obviously you can use fresh, especially when they're in season, you can definitely use fresh. A little bit of extra work in terms of removing the skins and seeds, but what you can do is blanch them. And very quickly, boiling water, and you can score a little X on your tomato on the bottom. You throw them into the boiling water for like 30 seconds, 20 seconds, take them out and throw them into an ice bath. So it chills, it stops the cooking, and then the skins will come off really easily, and then you can cut them in half and you can scoop out the seeds. So if you did have fresh tomatoes, you can use those, but it's a little bit of an extra step. There's nothing wrong with canned tomatoes. We love using canned tomatoes, and especially out of season, I find that this is a better product anyway. So hopefully, yeah, that answered your question as well. Whole tomato, plum tomato, those are my preferences, but any tomato would work for this. Okay, so tomato whole jar. This is about $7.96, so 800 mils, a little over about almost a liter, almost a full liter, right? So about 3 cups or so. That's going to go in. And then we're going to add some dried spices to this as well. So I love using a little bit of dried oregano. You can use dried basil. These spices, Steph, we could still use like some of these.
Absolutely.
For, right?
Yeah, I was recently talking to a patient and she was asking me about flavoring. So yeah, certainly you could use herbs and spices. And again, because you're not using that much, right? So it is coming from the plant. It is adding a little bit of, well, it does have fiber, but the amount that you're using is definitely not exorbitant. Because things like leafy greens, right? Kale, spinach, those are no-nos. You want to stay away from those because those are super fibrous. You definitely can have some types of the Boston lettuce, right? Because it's less fibrous. But yeah, certainly if you're flavoring things with any herb or spice, you can go ahead. I would just say that if it's dried, you don't have to worry about it. If you're using like, fresh dill or cilantro or parsley, and you're using it to flavor, let's say, a stock or a soup. In this case, my patient was making, I think it was like a gravlax, right? They were curing the fish and using the flavor of those fresh herbs. I would say probably discard that the same way you would do with an onion or a garlic so that you can you're getting the flavor, but you're not eating that. So that's really just in like high quantities, like a cup or more of those fresh herbs. But when you're using it to season in a case like this, like a soup, go ahead, use that flavor. Again, lots of antioxidants in those dried herbs, and it's a great way to flavor your food without adding like things like salt or fat or sugar.
Perfect. So actually on that point, this is a nice little trick if you find that the tomatoes are a little on the acidic side, which can happen sometimes, and that sort of sourness might be a little strong. Sometimes, it's a great idea to balance that, and you can add something sweet to balance that. But one way we can address that is by adding one of our favorite sweet vegetables on the choose list, and we're gonna add some carrot.
Yeah.
This is just some grated carrot. I'm balancing it on the knife here. These are my fancy tricks, and I'm gonna put this into the soup pot. So I just grated it with like a cheese grater, one sort of medium carrot, and this is gonna provide some nice body to the soup when I blend it, but it's also going to counterbalance that acidity and that sourness that might come off of the tomato. Okay, so you can see it's bubbling away, and we're gonna keep this pretty simple. So I have the carrot in there, and then you can go ahead and add about a cup and a half. I'm gonna kind of see how it is, but about a cup and a half to 2 cups of water, which you can, just put it back into the can just to rinse out any of that extra tomato juice. Or if you didn't want to add some more flavor, you can definitely add like a chicken stock or a veg stock to that as well. But if you just have water, then that's fine. I have just a little bit of veg stock here.
Yeah, and you can always get a veg stock, or you could purchase one, or a chicken stock, or whatever. That's low sodium. They always have an option available these days. One thing I wanted to say was when you're experiencing a partial bowel obstruction, it's super important to stay hydrated. Okay, so this means at least 1.5 to 2 liters of fluid per day. And you'll know if perhaps your doctor or your nurse has let you know that you're on a fluid restriction. So in that case, don't listen to me. But a soup is very hydrating, right? Because it's all fluid. So when we talk about, being hydrated, because it helps soften your stool, it could count as water, juice, soup, smoothies, right? So a soup like this is counting as hydration. Some people ask on the topic of hydration, so when I say smoothie, okay, it still has the fiber in it. Okay, so you still need to make sure that you're following the guidelines of what foods to choose and not choose, and limiting your fiber intake to 10 to 15 grams per day. Okay, and you could do this very simply by using Fitbit or MyFitnessPal, and basically, logging your intake, and then it's going to calculate so that you know how much fiber you're having. If you're juicing, however, this process is basically capturing the nutrients and the antioxidants from the vegetable or fruit, but removing that skin, the seeds, so basically removing that fiber. Okay, so a lot of people always ask, should I juice? And it depends, okay? In cases where maybe you are limited in the amount of fiber that you're allowed to have per day, juicing might be a good way to kind of get the benefits of fruit and vegetables without the fiber. So I just wanted to add that in.
All right, so we have that extra liquid in there, and it's simmering away. And that's pretty much it. We can let that simmer for like 10 minutes, just so that the flavors come together, but it's a pretty quick and simple soup. So a nice little addition that we're gonna add on top of that are some grilled cheese crostinis. So this is sort of our play on like a crouton for a soup and a grilled cheese. So we kind of met somewhere in between. And we're using, so I have it in my pan here, and I'll just bring it over. We have just some just regular kind of like crusty French bread that I toasted in the pan, just to get some nice color on there. And this is also another opportunity where we can infuse some more of that garlic flavor. If you like garlic, I'm a garlic lover, so anywhere I can put the garlic, we're gonna put the garlic. But when it's sort of nice and toasted like this, you get that garlic clove and just kind of rub it on top. That's it. We're not, mincing it or putting it, you're just rubbing it, giving that little almost perfume, that little essence of garlic. And it seems like just like a non-necessary or not a necessary task, but it does infuse, it does add quite a bit of garlic flavor to that. So there's a nice little trick. And then if we're gonna make these nice and cheesy, we're gonna put a little bit of, I'll put over here, we'll put a little bit of, you can do a Gruyere or a cheddar right on top. And you can bake these in the oven, or I'm just gonna do it straight on the pan. So it's kind of like an open-faced grilled cheese, I guess. And here's a way where we can sort of melt them. So what I do is, again, because they're already kind of toasted, I'm going to add just a little bit of water to this. Just a touch of water. That's going to help produce some steam, and then lid on top until they get nice and melty, and that'll take like a minute. So we can finish the rest of our soup. So I'm speeding this up a little bit, but 10 minutes simmering and you're good to go with the flavor for that. And so we're gonna go ahead and put that in our blender now to blend it up. Now, one little thing that we're gonna add, and this is a great little trick for any type of soups, even smoothies like Steph mentioned. If you want to bump up, this is protein, we're using skim milk powder. This is something that you don't use quite often, or you don't see in recipes quite often, right? But this is a great little ingredient. I know Steph's going to talk about it in a sec, but in terms of the texture, in terms of the creaminess, it's going to add this really nice, rich and creamy soup. Without the addition, like the necessary additions like cream or any other I guess liquid dairy. We're using a powdered dairy.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and I love that because so basically we want to make sure that we're getting not only nutrients and antioxidants but also protein. And so often vegetable soups don't really have much protein in them, unless of course you're adding let's say chicken or but for ones that are kind of more on the vegetarian side, you'll often find that it's like red lentils or cream to kind of boost up either the creaminess or adding that protein. And protein powder is a really great way to kind of do that trick. Obviously this one is neutral, no flavor, and it just kind of adds that creaminess to the dish. Because Jeremy and I always talk about making every bite count, and you might not be feeling super hungry all the time. You might experience some nausea as well, right? So you want to make every bite count. The other thing is having kind of that small meals throughout the day. So and eating smaller portions can maybe reduce some of the discomfort that you're experiencing, like pain or bloating. So kind of having 5 to 6 small meals or little snacks during your day. And what better way than a comforting tomato soup with some grilled cheese on the side, right? And if that is actually you feel like that's way too much for you, then maybe you have the soup and then a few hours later have that grilled cheese at another time. It really just depends on what's going on with you. We're just here to give you some ideas. And you do want to make sure that you are chewing your food well, but when you're having a soup, it's already pureed for you, and that you're eating slowly, right? Because this makes it easier to chew.
Finishing it up, so I blended the soup. You can remove the garlic at that point if you want to take it out. If you're okay eating garlic, obviously you can leave it in, blend it through. But for today's topic, it's really easy to kind of just take those garlic cloves out and then puree it with that skim milk powder. And you can see this really super creamy, airy, gorgeous color on the soup as well. And again, the milk powder, another nice little trick is sometimes when you do add dairy, and if it's not like a full fat dairy to soups or to sauces, anytime it's hot, it could very easily split the cream or the milk that you're adding, and it causes that curdling effect. And so you see kind of like chunks in the soup, which isn't too pleasant. And that's because the fat just isn't high enough, right? And that's why for a lot of cream soups, it's usually a higher fat cream that they suggest. With the milk powder, you won't get that splitting, you won't get that curdling, which is nice. So you can just sort of add it in right at the end, buzz it through, or whisk it with some hot water and then add it if you're not going to blend it, and that is a great way to make a nice creamy soup. So we have, how are we doing in the visual here? There's our creamy soup, and I believe our little grilled cheese crostinis are done. Maybe don't use your hands. Yeah, it's a little hot, but it's okay. There we go. There's our creamy tomato soup with grilled cheese crostinis.